We're live. Yeah, I've got this shit down now. Even without intro music, I know exactly when it goes. What's up, everyone? My name is James McCool. I'm the owner of PaydirtTFS.com. Today we're going to be doing a little walkthrough with Sheets. Sheets Bones. You guys know him from the DFS industry. He's terrific, fantastic player. We did a walkthrough of the NBA/NFL models. I think either last week or 2 weeks ago or something like that. But it was really helpful, and a lot of people found it to be something that they could apply so they could figure out a little bit more about their process. Because Sheets, like you said on the last time that we did this, there's a lot of shit on Paydirt that you didn't even know was there. And people share that sentiment. So this stuff is really, really important and valuable. So I'm excited to do one for NHL. All of that said, how are you, sir?
Doing well. Catching me as in a classic Sheets sun run in the hockey streets. Had like three takedowns in the last 2 weeks in hockey, which is a lot of fun. As I say, something's got to pay for the NBA, you know. So between hockey and other random stuff, we take care of the NBA a little bit. And again, my purpose for doing this is in part to share my process, but mostly greed. Because I would love to figure out ways to always improve my process. And quite honestly, as we've discussed, I mean, I've been a subscriber myself to Paydirt for, probably as long as you've been alive, as long as the site's been alive. And as you mentioned, it's hard, James, with like all this content and all this different stuff out there to really put in the time to dive into some of these sites that people subscribe to. Maybe not everybody subscribes to so many sites as I do, but I know that sometimes less is more, and you subscribe to all these sites and you're like, okay, I'm going to take this from this, and you never really get into it, you know. And so like right now, I have my processes. I have my own way of doing projections. I have a set of projections. Usually right now, I upload my custom projections to SaberSim, run my portfolio. X out my bow wow stack, so all I have is 6s, 5 2s, and 4 3s. Sim it using whatever SaberSim simulation field gives me. Upload if I remember late swap, and then leave it up to the DFS gods. Okay, yeah. That's literally the extent of my process, which is, you know, hashtag whatever works. But listen, when Tiger won the Masters, the U.S. Open, by like 20 strokes, the first thing he did afterwards, he completely changed his swing. You know, you always want to get better, and it was very revealing when we went through the last sport that we did to even see like all the different things within Paydirt that I literally had no idea existed. And it's going to be up to me to figure out how to actually employ that into my own process. But one thing I will say is that, you know, we've had many discussions about what Paydirt is over the last year or so. And you know what I never really figured out is that, you know, you have, okay, some sites require you to put all of your inputs in, right? Mm-hmm. And then and it's best suited for that. And a lot of other sites are just kind of automatic, where if you didn't know anything, you can go and kind of run stuff. Paydirt is actually more, I don't say suited, but if you wanted a site where you could just use the tools and automatically run stuff and run sims, Paydirt, you can do that with Paydirt. I mean, and I didn't really even think that was like possible, because I'll tell you something really funny. Like when I went to the sim page on the other sport, I didn't even realize that you could just hit sim and let it run. I thought it was just waiting on you to like put all these projections in or whatever it is. So if you were the type that wanted to just go and blast and trust James's models and trust the sims or whatever, you can create like a good, I would say good, whatever. You can create a very reasonable portfolio of lineups just without even doing anything. And we already discussed with football how you could go into deep within the weeds and the research to build your lineups on your own. And I'm still one of these days going to figure out what the best use of Paydirt is. You know, whether it's going to be for the automatic guy, is it going to be for the in the weeds guy? Is there something in the middle? And I don't know. I really found that football thing very revealing, and I'm very curious to see what hockey looks like also.
Yeah, when it comes to the things that I've built over Paydirt, I think that one of the challenges always is who you are building things for.
Yep.
And in our industry, one of the things that I have always been attracted to is building things that were a little bit different than what you see. everywhere else. Like building out median projections, everyone's doing that. So, you know, in actual business, right? Like in actual business economics, if you build something that everybody else already has, your product either needs to be better than everybody else's product that they already have, or you have to be able to market it better. And brother, I can't do either one of those things. Like, I think that median projections are median projections, and like you can back test and you can find a way to improve them incrementally, but incremental changes to median projections in current day DFS don't move the needle near enough for the layman's user. And from a marketing standpoint, I'm not really a marketing guy. So to me, the strength that I have is being able to build things that are a little bit different or intuitive or ease of use or stuff like that. And what I kind of look at Paydirt as is this almost Saber Sim light, where there's this usability of the tools that kind of give you this idea of this is an advanced program that's running. This is a higher level thing that you are using, but you don't have to have as much of an understanding of the things that you are doing with it in order to use it. And I think if you think about it that way, and you think about Paydirt as a way to find tools and models that can give you a reasonable facsimile of the super high-end stuff for a fraction of the price, that's probably the best way to think about Paydirt.
Okay, so you go into hockey, and the first thing, again, we'll do the same thing I did before. The first thing I would do is I would look at the first thing on the list, right? And NHL range of outcomes, which is, you know, Paydirt speak for projections, right? It took me a while to figure that out. And yes, I know that it's more than that, because it's not just the median, it's the floor, the ceiling, you know, and all these different derivatives of projections. But this is where this is. So from this one page, right, this is the full player range of outcomes. The only thing I could think to do with this is either look at it, right, to try to figure out who quote unquote good plays are, or export it. You know, like if I were going to export it, it would be for my own reasons, to generate my own projections, to put up somewhere else, and just to screw with it. Okay. So as far as I figure out who like good plays are, I guess from here you could always, like, I don't know, like sort by top finish, or I don't know, is there like a value column here or something like that? Like from this particular screen, yeah, you can get this information, but okay, so small field ownership of Nathan McKinnon, okay, that's I guess somewhat useful, but would you just like start from here? I mean, how would you even, I mean, what would you even do with this page?
Yeah, so with the range of outcomes, I think of it similarly to the NFL one, where it's much more important to think about stacks than it is to think about individual players, right?
Absolutely.
So realistically, what I should do is have the line combo range of outcomes be the first thing that you land on when you look at this, and then the player range of outcomes next to it, because this is ultimately what you care about, right? What stacks are going to be valuable, which stacks project well, which stacks have high ownership, stuff like that.
Well, and I'll tell you, you know, I don't know if this is going to be like a full primer on hockey or whatever. I'm sure you have people talking about this, but hockey is to me like baseball. You know, it's very similar, sort of, in that you really, I don't say don't care about the players, but you sort of don't. I mean, like you're just trying to get the stacks right, because this sport correlates so violently that, you know, it's hard enough to watch content where in an NBA stream people are saying, who do you like better, A or B? Okay, that's bad enough. But to hear people do that in hockey is like beyond brutal, you know, because it's just not like that. I mean, to the point, I mean, what I usually do is with my process is I start with the list of players. Okay. Actually, what I do is I start with just looking at the team totals of the game and saying to myself, which team do I think is going to have good stacks, right? Before even looking at anything, right? And whoever team's at the highest team total, I'm like, you know what? I bet you those are good stacks. And then what I do is, after I run my projections, I sort them by my own value system, whatever. And then what I do is I just gaze at it and I say, you know what? You know what would be nice? Actually, you know what? Let me share this just for funsies. All right. You have like a list like this. And I say, you know what I'd like to do? I'm listing them all by my value score. Let's see if there are guys that are near the top that are on the same team. Wouldn't that be nice, right? Because that means that they might be a good stack. And sometimes you have slates where you get like 5 guys right around here. Sometimes you don't. But again, I just kind of take a look at this and just kind of think, what do I imagine would be kind of good looking stacks? That's before I do anything. And then what I do is I upload my projections and I run them, and then I see if I'm right. Okay.
Yeah.
So what this does, right, is it takes you right to the stacks. And I have something like that too. Everybody, creates their own little thing, whatever. But if you start by going straight to the stacks, it certainly saves you some time, like from research, okay? Because you're going to get there anyway. So I'm looking at this, I say, okay, so how is this being ranked, like right now?
Currently, it's ranked by median projection.
Okay. Of the top, how many? 3? Is that what it is?
This will list out through 3 lines. Yeah.
No, but this is a 3-man stack. Is that what this is?
Oh, yeah. So the way that I approach line combos and power play, I ignore defensemen.
Okay.
Now, that might sound a little bit weird to a lot of people. But if a line does have a defenseman on it, it's going to be excluded from this list. And the reason for that is because a while back when we were doing back testing and we were setting up rules, what we found is that including defensemen in this doesn't give you any kind of upside edge versus just excluding them and using them as individuals.
That's very interesting, by the way.
When you are looking at defensemen, the only correlation that you should really care about is when they're connected to a power play rather than a line combo. So if you are looking at defensemen individually, if you're looking for a line combo that has a defenseman on it, that's the wrong way to go about it. You only care about power play and individual one-offs for defensemen who are either super expensive, like a Kucherov or something like that, or super cheap for a value play, right? So with line combos, we include centers and wings that belong to the projected line combo for that individual team. So Tampa Bay frontline 1 is Braden Point, Kucherov, and Gunsel, right? EDM FO1, Hyman, Nugent Hopkins, and McDavid. And typically the way this works out is you're going to have the frontline 1 as the highest overall medians because that's just the way that it goes. And then when you sort by 4x, which is the value multiplier for this, that's when you're going to start to see some FL2s pop up. Very infrequently are you going to be able to get all the way down to an FL4. And frankly, whenever I run on the solver, I just remove any 4th line. It's such a low expected outcome for me as somebody who only plays 5 to 10 lineups. There's just not any reason for me to dive that low.
I almost never even get to 3s, honestly.
Yeah. You hardly ever get like that Utah FL3 right there. Like that would be by itself really, really difficult to get to. You're very likely playing, any of the first 2 lines rather than any of 3 or 4. If you MME and you have a full portfolio, you might get some 3s. Very rarely are you ever going to get 4s. Now,
so you hit on the next point is that if you really want to make sure you're getting full 5-man correlation or whatever, then you'll go to this tab, I guess. So this is the power play range of outcomes, and this is my jam, so to speak. Like I really like to play like a whole bunch of dudes on the same team. The way I explain it to my 5-year-old, it's not really 5 anymore. It's kind of a term of art. Explain to my 5-year-old, the less things I have to get right, the better. So I've had just an incredible amount of success playing 5, 2s, and 6s. I would say that I've won about 15 of these GPPs, straight up. I would say by at least 10 of them, if not more, were 6s. So I'm not crusading because I don't care if anybody listens to me. But based on my experience, the optimizers, simulators, whatever, just completely underestimate the correlative value in hockey. So what I do, again, my process is, and we can talk about this, is I'll build a bunch of lineups first, and then I will X out the stacks I don't want. And that's an important distinction to make, right? Between whether you do that before or after. Like if you set rules before you build your lineups that I only want 6s and 5 2s, for example, let's say, or in any sport like football, whatever, then you really run the risk of getting some really awful lineups, you know, that maybe you wouldn't want. But if you start by giving no, you know, don't put your take on it, and then you back into what you want, or you filter after the fact, I think you have a better chance. But again, from a research perspective, when I would look at this, okay, Colorado looks good, Tampa looks good, Edmonton looks good. This is just, again, based on median. And if you went to 4X, that's the value one.
Yep.
Then you would get to Nashville Power Play 2 or whatever. I don't know. I don't know if I get to. I don't know if I play people like this. I really don't. So okay, this is all great, right? So what do we do with this? And we got to build our lineup somewhere, right? So we can either download these somewhere and upload them with an external projection, with an external optimizer, or use one on site. Now, the more that we can have people do on site, the better, right? And the less people have to go somewhere else, the better. So the next thing I would say is, let's go, I guess, straight to contest sims.
So let's take pause on that really quick, because I do think that the way that I usually go about it is kind of similar to the way that you do, where before I even run anything, I want to know what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Because similar to the way that I do it with baseball, like projections are going to tell me something that is almost not useful. That they will tell me for pitchers in baseball, that is useful. But for hockey, there's almost not a single projection that I'm looking at that is like going to tell me anything about the players that I'm going to play. What I want to know about is upside, and that upside relative to the price. So the range of outcomes is valuable in doing that, in being able to say, hey, we simulated out these lines against each other, and these power plays against each other, and these players against each other, and here's some information about how they all stack up against each other, right? And really quick, I should say, these are all ran individually of each other. So this is not the line combos are ran in the same system as power play and individual players. These all have their own dedicated sim in the back end.
I see.
Okay. So that's an important distinction to make as well. But this is going to tell you a little bit about like where you likely are going to find the best medians and where you're going to find the best floors and stuff like that. If you go up to the research sheets, I do want to point out another thing that I think is really valuable and that I use almost as much as I use the player range of outcomes, and that's team matchups and line market shares. So similar to the way that we talked about the NBA research sheets, I think the NHL research sheets are really, really undervalued in that these can give you a lot of really valuable information about the upside of teams and lines that you're not going to find just baked into the projections themselves. Like these do have some influence on the projections, but they're separate models. And so you're going to find some separate things about them. So what this is going to tell you is things like the price of each stack, right? That's what that FO1 money, all that kind of stuff. The team total for the team, which is obviously important. Talk about that. The game pace, which is the amount of shots between each team over the last 10 games. And then some info about hockey stats, right? And if you don't know what these hockey stats are, SF and SA are shots for and shots against. HDCF and HDCA are high danger Corsi for and against. So those are basically high danger shots that turn into goals. And what I have done is I've taken them and I've turned them into matchup oriented stats. So that SFM is a matchup based shots for. So that'll tell you based on the matchup, how many shots you should expect for teams, and more shots gives you more variance, gives you more goals. The high danger matchup also tells you a lot of info about where teams can find upside, because that's giving you an understanding of the team and the matchup and how many high danger shots are allowed within that matchup. And then on top of that, the HDCF percentage and those percentage columns at the right, those are the amount of high danger, aka shots that lead to goals, the percentage of those shots that are of the total shots for that team or matchup. So when we're thinking about upside, this is kind of like thinking about exit velocity and fly ball stuff against pitchers, where this kind of stuff is going to be baked into the team totals, but it does give you some really good information about where you should be focusing before you even go and build your lineups. Like based on this stuff, I know that Philadelphia, New Jersey, Pittsburgh, these guys are in really good matchups for upside in terms of high danger shots allowed and in the matchup. If you sort by pace, you can see that EDM and Tampa Bay, that's the highest game pace matchup. That matchup should have a lot of shots, a lot of going back and forth, a lot of skating. right? So this kind of stuff I think is really important for understanding kind of the context of the slate overall.
So you touched on a question which I was going to ask, and let me try to restate it because your answer, because I think it's an important distinction. Whenever content providers in any way start double counting things, it annoys me. When they say, well, this pitcher looks really good. He's got a really good projection. He's got good strikeouts, and he's in a good park. Okay, you said the same thing 3 times. Okay. And before you even got out of your first sentence describing this, you said, well, yes, some of this is baked into projections, but, and then there was a couple of things which are important distinctions. All right. Normally, again, when you look at in-depth research, my initial objection is it's all that should be baked into the projections to some degree. But the important distinction you made were twofold. Number one, a little less important to me, is that it's a separate model. But the more important thing that you hit on right at the end was that although it's baked into projection, there are certain aspects of these which are more that are more fragile to upside, or more determined upside than other parts that are also baked into projection. So if you have, I don't want to say ties, but if you have lines that look pretty, really, really good, if you're playing, again, depends what you're playing, right? If you're playing MME, you want, real high scoring, high risk GPPs, then you'll want to have this column, I guess, be a column either to break ties or, again, just to get an idea of what you're looking at before you even get started. That, like, if you, like, for example, let's say you get like a whole bunch of any of these teams, right? You won't worry as much about getting so much of them, because you know what? You have this one metric here that is correlated to upside.
Yep, that's exactly right. So for me specifically, I am a single entry or 3 max player, right? So I have to make decisions. I can't just play a bunch of teams. So if I am getting ready to build out, I go and I look at the line range of outcomes and I say, okay, I know that I like player team A, B, and C. And then I go here and I say, okay, well, so teams B, C, and D are the ones that look really good from an upside perspective. That kind of helps me say, all right, maybe I have a little bit less interest in A if they show up, right? I should have a little bit more interest in B and C. And then the other point on that of tying in upside, to speak a little bit about things from an algorithmic perspective. When you are doing simulations of a sport like NHL, it's very hard to do so. I shouldn't say that. I think that many people do it in a way that is not necessarily accurate to how much violent correlation you have alluded to, where there's a lot of people who, when they build out projections for NHL, they're not doing it in a bimodal sense. They're doing it in normal distributions, or they're doing it in ways that it's going to assume something towards a linear outcome for players. I think that
you want to dumb that down just a little bit for me?
Yeah. So NBA is a normal distribution when you're thinking about it. When you think about the outcomes for NBA for, say, points distributions, if a player has a median outcome of 20 points, then we can assume a normal distribution where they're at the middle of that bell curve for 20 points. And then you have their ceiling, which is a 75th or 80th percentile over on the right. And you have their floor, which is the 15th to 20th percentile on the left. And within reason, they're going to land somewhere between their 20th and 80th percentiles,
right,
in a normal distribution. But that doesn't really represent what NHL is, right? I mean, when you think about what NHL is when you take a shot, it's not a normal distribution that it's going to go in or out. We're dealing with non-binomial distributions, and we're dealing with what's called a bimodal distribution, which is actually 2 bell curves next to each other and looks like a pair of tits. So you actually have the most likely things are either that you're going to be somewhere in the middle of one or the other, but it's very unlikely that you're going to be in the middle.
Okay.
So when you are simulating out NHL, you have to do 2 different things. You either have to do it in a bimodal distribution, or you have to do it in a truncated distribution, which is the way that I approach it. And a truncated distribution is kind of a mix of those things, where you say, instead of it being a perfect bell curve, the bell curve is slanted over to the right. So the vast majority of the outcomes are going to be 0 to 1, and then you have a long tail that is somewhere between 1 and 20. So the median is actually lower than the standard deviation of the ceiling. I know that I got super math based there, but I think
that's okay. That's okay. And so, but that is part of, well, you know what? Part of the, I would say issues, but part of what I would like from Paydirt is when it runs the sims to give a little more detail of like where it all came from. Mm-hmm. So it is good to hear at least, you know, a little bit of the math behind how it's all set up. That's for sure.
Yeah. I can fucking talk about this all day. Yeah. But all of that's a long way of saying and very mathy way of saying, I like to use the slate matchups to say, okay, since I know that this is not a normal distribution and there's a ceiling that has tail outcomes, I want to be able to focus on the things that might have a longer tail outcome because it's a black box in the algorithm. I can't really tell you exactly what that tail outcome is from a measurable standpoint, but using this stuff, I can tell you that the more high danger shots somebody can take, the longer their tail is for their ceiling. So
what do we have with line market shares?
Yeah. Before we move on to that, I wanted to answer this question. Are you saying that any given defenseman's correlation with the line is the same as other Ds on his team, or that they simply don't correlate with forwards at all? There's always going to be correlation between line mates. But what we have found is that the correlation that you get from pairing a defenseman with his wings and centers in line is not near as valuable as the correlation that you get when pairing with a full power play combo. And I think the reason for that is that the more players that you involve in the correlative cluster, the more points extra that you get on top of their median projection. So it's not that they don't correlate with the other line mates, it's that they correlate significantly more with their power play combos. So I just wanted to answer that really quick.
First of all, I didn't see where the chat was, and I would like to shout out. I didn't even see that was Adam Perry coming from the chat. I don't know if you're familiar with him. I know Adam for quite some time. I haven't heard from him in a while. Adam, I hope you're doing really, really well. He's one of the real learners out there. You know what I mean? Like he always asks a lot of challenging questions, and he's really like super sharp. And I think he started doing his own content at some point as well. And I certainly wish him nothing but freaking successes. He's one of the good guys. So glad I caught up with him, at least the tail end of the question, at least.
Yeah. But yeah, move on to the line market shares. Line market shares are really cool too. So what we are looking at with the line market shares after it loads, this is going to tell you information about the distribution of points, goals, blocks, assists, stuff like that within each line combo, and it's sensitive to the team total. So this is a top-down model. For those that don't know what that means, top-down means that it assumes based on macro variables, things like team totals, it'll break down from there. Rather than bottoms up, you're building up towards the team total. This is a top-down model where it's telling you the percentage of shots, high danger shots, goals, and assists and blocks that each individual line combo has relative to the rest of the lines on their team. So for instance, Minnesota FL1 with a team total of 3, they average 35% of the total shots for Minnesota, 42% of the high danger shots, 45% of all goals scored by Minnesota, as well as I'll explain max goal percentage here in a second, 45% of assists, 11% of blocks, and their projected goals based on their team total, based on all that information, is 1.35. So you could very easily just sort projected goals and see what line combo is projected to have the most goals based on these stats.
How is this being sorted right now?
Currently, this is sorted by shots, by overall shots. You can also sort by last 14 days data. Okay. So you can see recency data as well. But this is really, really good for context as well. And all this stuff is, before we even build, this is all context for teams, right? And this stuff is included in the projections and in the buildup. For the total, like what we were looking at here, the last 14 data is not. So again, that distinction is really important. Somebody in the Discord, Pablo, who we do streams with all the time, he was the one who actually pushed me into making the last 14, the recency stuff, because he wanted to see how teams are performing in the recent sample as well. And I had only had full year. So This is really cool for context and again for understanding where the distribution is for teams based on their upside.
Well, what's again? We're trying to find something actionable. I will tell you in advance that one of my big struggles after I did my normal process. Now, again, the slate doesn't start now, so I'm gonna have to do everything again. My one issue I was having is why I'm getting like a zillion % Minnesota. So like again, like I'm not saying that this is you start from here and you get to there, but if I already ran this and I get some kind of validation by a metric like this, that would be or a chart like this, that would be very reassuring. Now you know your systems better than everybody, and one of the thing that I always like to have fun with is knowing my projections, knowing how my own Saberton works. I'd like to predict like before I do anything, like what I end up getting. Like what do you think based on what we've seen so far? If you haven't run anything yet, what do you think the Sims are likely to churn out here?
So based on everything that we've seen, I'm going to guess that we're going to get a lot of Nashville. We're going to get a lot of Tampa Bay, and we're going to get a lot of Colorado.
Okay, not Carolina. Don't be too owned.
Probably not going to. Well, we'll get some Carolina, and that's just as a function. What it's going to say is we'll get Carolina, but it's going to say that Carolina is overowned.
That's what I figured. Okay,
that's my guess.
All right.
Really quick, he said. Go over to the game logs correlations model because you'll recognize this from NBA. But regarding correlation, the one reason I think that may be off is because the top D pairing tends to get more minutes than pairing 2 and so on. So D1 is going to have overlap a lot with time on ice rather than any given strength line. Yeah, that's right. The thing that you focus on the most when you're looking at playing a defenseman is he going to get time on ice? But then after that, when you're looking at who to pair him with, I have found that pairing with a power play is the thing that is like the next biggest piece. From a projection standpoint, time on ice is king when it comes to defensemen because that's where they're going to get blocks or they're going to get shots, opportunities, stuff like that. But then when you're building out the way that Sheets does and the way that I do, since we're not looking at projections as much, the thing that we need to count on is that we are maximizing the correlation that we get within our lines. And that is what I have found based on D's in the power play.
Okay, so where are we? Game logs? Couldn't imagine ever getting to the screen. So tell me why I'm here.
This is very simply just for people that like to dive into the data.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Okay.
It's another one of those things where super users could come in here and you can download this entire thing. You can export the entire game logs. It is downloadable. You can see a whole bunch of different things like rebounds and assists and points and all this different kind of stuff, right? This is a super user thing. The one thing that you would likely use is the correlation matrix, which is going to tell you, as we're talking about correlation with D-men and the power plays, this is going to tell you things like the fantasy performance or the time on ice for players within a line and the correlation between them. So if you just choose a team here, you can see what the correlation is between players on that team from a fantasy perspective. So again, you and I are not likely to use this in our process when we are building out multiple lineups. Right. But for me, when I build out a single lineup, I want to kind of know the correlations between players and think about that when I'm trying to say build in a one-off. If I'm building out like a 4-3 or a 4-2-1 or something like that, if there's somebody that maximizes my correlation within a certain price range, I'm probably more inclined to try to use them. But similar to what that kind of the overarching idea of this is for super users who want to have an idea of how to best maximize their process for single entry, 5 max, stuff like that, rather than building out for MME. That being said, one thing that I like to use correlation matrices for is setting up rules to avoid players who are significantly negative in terms of their correlation. So for NBA, what I use it for is if there's a significant negative correlation between fantasy points for shooting guards specifically, I'll set rules to make sure that I avoid having those guys together.
And you don't trust your Sims and your whatever to just automatically get that for you?
I mean, I do, but like when I'm building on the solver, right? Like I don't
Right.
trust that the solver just
Okay.
in optimizing is going to be able to do that.
Right. That's true. That's true.
Yeah. So in NBA, that's what I use that a lot for. For this, I use it for time on ice. I do like to kind of look and say, okay, well, if there's a significant negative correlation for time on ice between two players, it means they barely ever share the ice together. They're not crossing on power play or lines or anything like that. Because while line combos and power play combos are something that are valuable and can tell us a lot, they're not absolute and they're not concrete. Sometimes guys will get on the ice with each other that aren't necessarily supposed to because of coaching decisions. So I do think that it's important to kind of think about that kind of stuff if you are playing consistently and have an idea of guys that may or may not share the ice together if you're not using something that does this stuff for you, like a Saber Sim or a Contest Sims or stuff like that.
All right, so let's get back into here and let's just go. We did this. Well, before we, people can wait another few minutes. We'll do this in a second. So let's see the betting tools here, just because I've never clicked on this. Is it going to be similar to the football one?
Mm-hmm. Yep. The only thing that I don't have included with NHL is going to be a game model. I did try to build a game model, and I built a game model that was exactly fucking break even. And I said to myself, fuck that. I'm not going to maintain a model that is like exactly break even or plus or minus 1%. When you look, the funny thing about when you look at lines for NHL, every single game environment is somewhere between a 5.5 and a 6.5 overall total for the game. And like every single team has the same spread. Some of them in massive blowout situations might have a spread of 2.5, but typically it's 1. Like it's similar to MLB. I think that I can beat MLB totals and I think I can beat MLB spreads because those game environments go farther than 6.5. But for hockey, man, I can't beat it. So I stopped trying.
So this is not going to have the same thing that football did, where it gave your best, bet of the day or whatever.
Not for the game level. If you do the stat specific simulations, you can still find all the best props to lay based on up to the minute props that are loaded. So if you just go and simulate all props or go to DraftKings, right, and then simulate the prop category, then it'll tell you all the bets that have a specific plus or minus EV, all that kind of stuff, right?
Just like that?
Yep. And it broke.
Okay.
So look at that.
It's not a good. All right, fair enough.
Yeah. But it does work as soon as I go and take a look at why it broke.
Okay.
It does work the same as the NFL and NBA ones, where you run the stat-specific sims, and then it tells you what the top overall edge is, and you can just go lay those bets.
Pivot Finder, we went over for football. I presume it works the same.
Yep.
Let's see. All right. So again, like let's say who's going to be top X owned, right? So we're going to look at the top 20. Wait, so the top 5 owned players, I guess.
Yep.
Plus 300, all positions, right?
Yep.
And then this one, simulate appropriate pivots.
Yep. And then it'll tell you the pivots for those players based on a threshold of $300 and 3 median points. So typically you're going to use this after you have built your lineups or when you are building out rules for something like the solver or lineup HQ or stuff like that. What it allows you to do is kind of get an idea of the players that are worth the ownership that they are garnering and the players that you can pivot to if they are not.
So I would sort
this by pivot source is what I always do. So that you can get an idea of the players that is saying you should be pivoting off of. Typically, the more players that you have for a pivot source, the less they are worth the ownership that they are garnering. So for a goalie, all the goalies basically project the fucking same. Like,
right. So they're all pivots.
Yeah. You probably shouldn't eat that ownership on I don't even know how to pronounce that.
On any goalie.
Yeah. But then as you work down, you can see that Stamkos as a center, he's going to have some pivots and you're going to have some. Right. Yeah. See, so this is less valuable than it is in things like NBA since we are focused almost primarily on stacking combos and line combos and stuff like that. But when you're building out your rules and when you're taking a look at the slate from this perspective, you still want to kind of get an idea of if a lineup has player X, is there a way for me to gain relative value by swapping to player Y? And if you're playing single entry or 3 max, that can still be valuable even after you've built your lineups, because sometimes you'll build out your lineups and you'll say, all right, so I have the most popular FL1, I have the most popular FL2, and then I have the most popular D-man and the most popular goalie. And it's like, well, shit, I got to get off one of them, right? So then you can go in and you can pivot off of there. Something that would be cool that I just thought of while I was giving that little talk is a way to build in the pivot finder to also take into account line combos. So you could run a full line combo and say, is there a swap off of Minnesota FL1 to Nashville FL2 or something like that? That's a cool idea.
Same question, how often do these models update?
So I will run them once in the morning at around 9 a.m. and then I'll wait until afternoon skate. I'll run them again at about 2. And then I'll run them again at 4-ish to get ownership more solidified using ownership aggregates. And then I'll run them again at about 6 p.m. Eastern as we're moving towards the end of the slate. These ones don't need as many updates as NBA, so this is kind of more touch and go. But I do update through the day.
So we're in the contest sim area. We're going to go large. We're going to say, is today going to be sharper or weaker? So on the one hand, you have more people with not much to do because there's only a 3-game slate.
Yeah.
But I'm scared of when all the regs start to play hockey. We'll call it very sharp for now. And again, so this is just maybe it's just me. Every single time I would come here, I would see this blank screen, and I literally would think that it was waiting on me to upload something. You know what I mean? Like I didn't even realize that from this point you could just run the sim right here, and maybe so you run the sim, and so okay. So in the background with the activity guy up here, so it's taking the range of outcomes that was most recent, creating a contest field, what it thinks the field is going to do based on whatever algorithm you've created. Also, we talked about this with respect to football. It's important if you're going to create a good contest field to not just put all the best lineups in, to throw in a couple of stinkers, because that's what people play. Some people play stinkers. And I'm curious to see how this all gets ranked and whatever.
Yeah, so one of the cool things that I did with this from a quality of life standpoint, and this happened maybe 2 weeks ago. So the seed frames are created, kind of the lineups that are used to create the field. Those are created during the actual projection creation process. And then it's held in a database. And one of the things that was causing kind of like a log jam with this was it would load all of those lineups, all 500,000 of them, into the app when somebody opened up the app, and you would have to wait for it to be done before you could even use it. Now, what it's doing is it's only pulling in the lineups and doing some query optimization on the amount of lineups that you need to run a large or medium or a small or a custom. You can run custom size fields as well. So that's kind of a nice little quality of life thing. It's faster and it's less memory intensive. But then what it does is it takes those lineups based on the sharpness of the field and then simulates out the contest 1,000 times, and then tells you what the results of those are.
Okay, so again, then I'm learning. So first of all, this number on the left doesn't mean anything. I've learned that.
Nothing at all. No, just an index number.
It's just whatever. It's a tracking number, I guess, of some kind. Okay, so I'm going to hit export all full frame in a minute. But before we do that, so winning frame statistics, the minimum salary of the winning lineup, is that what frame means?
Yep.
Is 44.5, projected 96 ownership of this. Fantasy, man, I'm supposed to remember this. Was that the average? No, what was the fantasy number? What is
fantasy? Is the amount of fantasy points that were scored when that lineup won the GPP.
Okay, but GPP projection is what? Okay, very good. Here's overall exposures. Overall of what? Overall of all, how many lineups this is? Now, how many lineups is this, by the way?
That's going to be showing 1,000 lineups.
So when this says overall exposure, this is overall exposure of the 1,000 lineups?
Yep.
Okay, so we could go to me, what's most important is go to team exposures.
Yep.
So team exposures of the 1,000 lineups, we get like again probably well spread out because we're talking about 1,000. Okay. But the question is going to be is if we want to play 50, what the top 50 are. So this is somewhat useful, but I think what we probably want to do is just export this full frame.
Yeah.
Let's just see what this is before we do this. Okay, so here we're so this is currently listing all these lineups by, I imagine, win count. Like the amount of times that the lineup wins the GPP.
Yeah.
And this shows what the stack is. This one, NA, is that no stack?
No, that's Nashville, and that's a bug that we just found on stream. That should be Nashville. So that is actually fragmenting between Nashville and NA are considered Nashville. That's
and CA is Carolina.
Carolina. Yeah.
I'm used to these 3 letters. Okay. So we export the full frame here, and then we're going to look at this and see what all this is. So this is just going to be a spreadsheet, right? Okay. So this okay. So if we did this, and let's just say we did the top, however, 50 lineups, how do we know what percent owned of those 50 is a certain team?
So down in if you go down to the exposures, that is going to tell you after I fix the bug, right when we get off of this, the amount of team exposures that you're going to see. So when you open that up, it's telling you how often a team was stacked in the winning lineups.
Okay. So I would so here again, if you wanted to, you could sort these however you want. I imagine. So there's no sort by ROI, right? That's what I'm all used to.
No, and the reason for that is it's two-pronged. One, when I built this algorithm, I did not have the ability to pull in the contest data, right?
Okay.
So the hard part of this is if you're going to measure out ROI, the thing that you actually have to have is the contest structure that you are simulating. Because ROI doesn't make sense unless you know how much money you're going to be using and making. Okay. I do have the ability to do that now, but I have not built that into the system yet. So in the future, near-ish future, probably in the offseason NFL, I'm going to be building out some ROI measurements. The second part of that is that I think that because there are so many moving parts to managing ROI, that I think that nobody really does it in a way that is accurate. And one of the things that I have been really adamant about, especially in this industry and critical of with this industry, is putting something together that is at the very least a reasonable facsimile of accurate towards the thing that you are aiming for. It was the biggest issue that I had with the whole contest sims movement when it happened last year, was that nothing was actually accurate to what people were saying. They were just simulating lineups against each other. Now, the products have gotten better in the industry. SaberSim is still, I think, the leader of the industry in terms of contest sim packages. But even then, I think that there are some warts that you can attribute to things like measuring ROI and EV based on the accuracy of the field that is being created. Okay. So there's a lot of things that I'm kind of wishy-washy about when measuring ROI, and I won't build something if I don't think I can do it correctly.
So here is a bug that I found before, which is still there. I just wanted to show you. So if I download these and I sort them by win count, for example, you have all 4 of these lineups the same.
That's because it has won the GPP 4 times.
I know that, right? But if I'm trying to pick which 50 lineups to play, it's problematic if I do it from here. You know what I mean?
What I would say is it's a feature, not a bug, but you would like that feature to be different. And I can do that. That's easy to do.
Right. So I mean, back to my question. So I've run all this. Which 50 lineups am I playing? You know what I mean? Like from this, I've run the Sims. How do we want to rank these? I mean, which of these things do I want to play?
So from a super simple standpoint, if you just wanted to jump in and use this, what I would say is you should probably sort it by either projection or by GPP projection. I think
projection. Okay.
I think that both of those are very valuable. And I think that it'll put you in a position where you are going to be maxing out your salary as well. You should be paying attention to winning frame statistics and staying somewhere between that median and max in salary. I think that's another important thing to say as well. But from a very simple user standpoint, if you just wanted to sort by GPP projection and use one of the top 5 or 10 lineups, you could absolutely do that. I use it in combination with the research sheets that I have built out, right? And say, okay, so I know based on the research stuff that we saw that Tampa Bay is very valuable, Colorado, Nashville, stuff like that. I know that I like those quite a bit. So I'm going to be looking for more of those in these lineups. What I like to do is export it and then do my Excel magic and find a way to sort out those lineups in the exported Excel, and then do some pick and choose based on ownership and projection and stuff like that.
So I will encourage you to make this change. Let's say I wanted to sort them by, what did you say? GPP projection?
Yeah.
So again, if you do this, I'm pretty sure. No, it might not. Hold on. By fantasy point projection? Hold on a minute. Or just the smallest. I just hope that we don't get dupes here for the same reason that we were getting dupes when we sorted by win count.
You'll get considerably less dupes doing it this way. And the reason for that is because the fantasy score is dictated by the individual contest sim that ran. So even if a lineup wins 4 times, watch. So sort that by win count. The fantasy score that won each and every time is not going to be exactly the same. So you see one.
Yeah, I see that. I see this. I see this.
So with that second set, that one that won 3 times, like you're going to see that one be different.
I see. So even though this won 4 times, it didn't win with the same score all 4 times.
Right.
So that's why it's okay to sort them, let's say, in this way.
Right. But to your point, I can make it so this export removes duplicates. Like that's a very, very easy thing to do. Yeah. And I think it's a worthwhile change.
And again, listen, I'm asking for what I'm asking for, but it would be nice to be able to go more min uniques if I felt like it or whatever, and to make your rules like min salary and stuff. Like, I don't care. Like if this says 44.5 and I got to it, I'm playing it. I don't really care. Yeah. But I know some people might want to throw up playing 44.5. Well, we could give them a Paydirt barf bag if you want, if it bothers them that much, I guess. Okay. So what did we end up getting here? How do we even know what we got?
So once I fix the bug that is showing up, then we'll know based on the team exposures the most likely teams that we should be looking at. Okay. And the amount of teams that we got. You can also go through and you can see, when you take a look at the winning, if you go down and look at the exposures and you look at the overall exposures for like the players, you're going to be able to see kind of like where the biggest focus is, right? Like we have 2 Nashville, 2 Tampa Bay. If you sort it by exposure there, then you're going to be able to see like these are the players that we have the most exposure of. So that's going to give you a little bit of information about what teams we ended up wanting to stack.
You know what's awesome about hockey? This is what I love about hockey. Like NBA, we could have 7 different sites with their projections running sims, and there'll be so little difference between the lineups. I mean, honestly, I've done this. Yep. You can take forget that. I mean, you change one setting in your hockey, even your own projections, you're going to get just completely different things. It's like the ultimate rocket ship theory. You're off by 1 millimeter, like everything is different.
Oh yeah.
So I guess in summary, this has definitely been more of a how to use the tools thing than a slate preview. But just for funsies, I will say what I would be doing right now is I'm based on my process, getting all kinds of Minnesota for some reason. And again, I am also feel a little bit validated by that metric. And depending on my settings, I'm either if I want to just play the best plays, I'll play some Carolina. But if I want to try to win something, it would be Minnesota and the team that you mentioned before, the Nashville.
Yeah.
So those are my 3 top owned: are Minnesota, Carolina, Nashville. I'm probably going to end up getting rid of some of the Carolina. But again, we're more about process than anything else, and I think this ended up being extremely useful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that NHL is one of the sports where so much of it comes down to personal process. MLB and NHL, I think are both very, very, very heuristic based, and very much so like everybody approaches it in a different way. So doing a breakdown of how I use the tools is going to be less applicable than it is for like NFL or NBA, where like kind of everybody just does. There's certain ways to do things in NFL and NBA, whereas NHL I think is much more open ended. It's one of the reason why it's one of the best DFS sports.
Yep.
I think that NHL and MLB, frankly, are considerably better than NBA and NHL. And if the prize pools were flipped, I think everybody would agree with me. But
which ones do you think are better?
I think MLB, I think baseball and hockey are considerably better than NFL and NBA from like a how to build and process standpoint. I think they just kick the shit out of both of them.
Listen, I know that NFL is supposed to be all soft and everything like that. I'm pretty sure that that's my worst sport.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's hard, dude. And the reason why it's hard, that we can go into a whole thing on why NFL is hard, but like people are like, oh, well, there's so much dead money. Yeah, but also you have the best players in the world putting all of their effort in NFL because that's where the prize pools are. So like, yeah, you have maybe instead of just 15% of the pool is dead in baseball, 20 to 22% is dead in NFL. Sure, fine, it pays the rake. But then in order to win the GPP, which is where all the money is, you're fighting with the best players on the planet who are putting their entire bankroll into play every single fucking day. Yeah. So like, yeah, you have a little bit better min cash equity, but your EV is not actually better than it is in something like MLB or NHL, where you have these violent correlations and really violent swings, and first or last is really what matters.
Yeah.
So I don't think that NFL, while it is softer, it's harder to win. It's a skill ceiling thing. And it's the same problem that I have with FanDuel, where everybody's always like, oh, well, FanDuel is softer. Yeah, because everybody can build the best fucking lineups. Like that, it doesn't mean that you have better win equity. It means you have better min cash equity. So you feel better about the lineups that you build, and you can build higher projected lineups. But that doesn't mean that you can beat the field better. So I just think that people look at it fundamentally wrong. And the way to find a really good DFS sport is one where you have violent volatility, you have a lot of correlation, and you have skill expression, which, to your point on NHL, you tweak one thing in an NHL process and you get vastly different lineups. Yeah. And that's where you can really find the good players from the bad players. I think the good players, the reason why you don't like when DFS players come into the NHL streets, like during the All-Star break and shit, is because those guys are good fucking players and it dilutes the pool.
Yeah.
Same thing, when everybody is playing baseball at the beginning of the year for baseball is actually pretty fucking hard because nobody has anything and it's all process driven. But then you get in the middle of the year and those guys have moved on to other shit.
Right.
And like, then it starts to get softer. So it's all about how the field is going to play. And to that point, Perry, another good question. Does the sharpness toggle what stack types are played or just P owned? It does toggle what stack types are used. So the way that it works is if you are building out on very sharp tools for the contest sims, it's going to pull the best lineups from the seed frames. So the seed frames are built. Perry, I don't know if you tuned into the last one, but the seed frames are built on a process that basically tries to assume the strength of the field based on the most popular players that are going to be used as a representation of how good of players they are. And then it goes through the entire gambit of here's a section of really good lineups. Here's a section of medium lineups. Here's a section of shitty lineups. When you do this, the very sharpness, it tries to aim for using a lot more of the good lineups rather than the shitty lineups. And when you use the not sharp setting, it uses more of the bad lineups rather than the really good lineups. So that's the way that works. And that's where you have to think about DFS as a whole as well.
So the Hatter, he's the one that does the tennis stuff?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, can't wait. Getting close. Getting close. Getting close for tennis to come back. League of Legends coming back soon.
Oh yeah. I have some cool things planned for League of Legends.
I can't wait.
I'm working with Emmerich, Shark Cove, and we're going to be building out some betting oriented stuff and retooling the League of Legends models to be a little bit more manually malleable, right? And so you're going to be able to input like kill and death totals and see what things change and like a lot more usability. So
maybe one time this year your models will let me play an underdog. I don't know.
No, well, I mean,
or a golfer that's not going to make the cut like 85% of the time.
Look, those guys suck. What do you want from me? It's not that you can't play them; it's that you shouldn't have any large stand on them. That's the problem.
Because you play 5 or 6 sets, you're going to need teams like Minnesota that are priced right. Yeah, we'll see. I'm going to go for my Dino Cicerelli one off. Hope he comes through. All right. This was awesome. Hatter, we got to do tennis. Got to do tennis soon.
Yeah, we gotta convince him to take some time away from his big boy job to go run them. He doesn't have as much time as he used to, which is why he can't.
Get your big boy job. It's tennis time.
I know, that's what I'm saying. No, I agree. I agree. I fucking badger him about it all the time. We'll get him to run them. The problem is that he has to run. His models are silly in that they are incredibly complex, and he runs them through a neural net.
Tennis, you made. How hard did you make tennis? Oh my!
That's why they're so fucking good. I know they're so good. Yeah. Anyway, this is great. And I hope that it was informational. I'm certainly going to have it in the tutorial section over at Paydirt. If you have not checked out Paydirt, you should. I think that it's a hidden gem, and I will continue to say that until I have 500 subscribers. So go check it out. If not, then let's fucking win another hockey slate for Sheets here.
Let's do it. Make sure. You tweet. When you tweet it. Make sure you tag me, and I'll read. I'm like the worst, so I'll retweet the tag or whatever it is. I'll make sure I get it out there.
Okay. All right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.